starting now. So if you have questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. You can see the chat option as an option on the bottom of your screen. Or you can just hop on your microphone and ask questions yourselves. Leigh, before we get started, if you could introduce yourself and explain a little bit why you're on this panel.
Thank you so much, Daphne. I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you and with Justin. I'm a member of the Indiana Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission, which has been established by Common Cause Indiana and the League of Women Voters of Indiana, and about 25 other not-for-profit organizations. Over the years, many of us have been working to try to get redistricting reform done in Indiana, to end what's called gerrymandering, where legislative and congressional districts are drawn to favor one party or the other, or somebody who's already in office to try to make sure they stay in office. And it really undermines the idea of one person, one vote. So we've tried all the other ways of getting the Indiana General Assembly to address some of these issues, and nothing has worked, because the party that's in office, whether it's Democrat or Republican, often tries to just keep the status quo rather than allowing reform to occur. So the commission has been formed to try to help people across the state of Indiana understand what's involved with redistricting, and to get them behind the effort to make sure that it's done fairly and equitably. I know a number of members of the General Assembly personally, and I know many of them really favor election reforms and ending gerrymandering, but organization of the General Assembly is such that they can't have their voice heard. So they've told me, said, we hear you and we know and we understand what the issues are, but until there's a groundswell of public support for changes in Indiana, they're not going to occur. So the idea behind the commission is to try to generate that public opinion, that voice of the people that says it's time to make some improvements in our elections process and our gerrymandering in Indiana. I've been involved in politics in a lot of different ways. I don't consider myself a real partisan, although I've been the chairman of the Republican Party in Porte County, and I've been the mayor of LaPorte. I really just believe in good government. And I believe in making sure that our elections process in Indiana is run fairly and equitably, and that people are well represented. So I guess that's why I'm here.
Great. Okay. So going back to the film, obviously the film took place in Georgia. Are the issues that they discussed something that are a concern for Indiana?
I'm sure many of the things that occurred in Georgia have also occurred in Indiana. But I would have to say that in general, elections are run much more fairly and equitably in Indiana than it appeared to me from watching this film has been the case in Georgia. I know in LaPorte County, we've been very actively involved with a little group called the Better Government Study Group. And our goal has been to improve the elections process. And we've worked with the Board of Elections and Registration in LaPorte County. We found them very responsive. We found them very concerned about making sure that people have the right to vote. If there's a problem, they'll try to work with those people to make sure their vote is registered and counted. This year, for example, the Board of Elections approved 2 new early voting sites, one in Wanata and one in Cool Spring Township, to make it more convenient for people to vote. They're also right now have study committees in place to look at the possibility of creating voting centers in LaPorte County, so that people could go to any of, say, 8 or 10 different voting centers to vote. They wouldn't have to go to the one for their precinct. We have 92 precincts in LaPorte County, and trying to staff all of those sites and to have them done fairly and equitably is tough. So making some changes to make it more convenient, make it easier to vote. I'm one who believes strongly that we ought to encourage voting by mail. As we've looked across the country, The states that have voted by mail systems that have been very thoughtfully prepared have the highest voter turnout in the country. And Indiana has not done so well in terms of voter turnout. In 2014, for example, we were the worst state in the country in terms of the percentage of registered voters who actually voted. This year, in the 2020 general election, we were 42nd out of 50 states. And I just don't think that's an acceptable place for us to be. So I'm very much in favor of improvement. I think the situation in Georgia that was pictured in the 2018 election really does not represent Indiana, but we're not where we ought to be. We can be much better, and I hope we're going to be.
Okay. So where can people find out their voting rights before an election so that that situation doesn't happen?
Well, the voter registration office is available. It's very accessible. Simply calling there, you can make sure that you're properly registered. You can make sure where your precinct is located, where the voting site is. They're very accessible, and both Republican and Democrat. It's a nonpartisan kind of office, I believe. So that's the very best place to go. The voter registration office is located in the county complex. Telephone is listed to call the county number, and they'll connect you with the voter registration office.
Okay. We do have a question. To fix voter engagement, does expanding mail-in voting help?
It definitely does. Now, the one thing I would say is the vote by mail system has to be very thoughtfully designed and implemented. Just to say next month, we're going to have vote by mail doesn't work. You've got to do a number of things to make sure that it's secure, that there's a safe way of voting, that your vote is going to be registered and counted. And the folks in Colorado and Minnesota and other states where it's been done very, very effectively are most anxious to work with Indiana to help us to be able to do that. I can't really understand why the reluctance, for example, former President Trump was very negative about vote by mail. The incidents of fraud in vote by mail systems in states like Colorado, Minnesota, and Maine are infinitesimal. It works, and it really encourages people to vote. And so in Indiana, we had about 60% participation in the 2020 general election. Minnesota had 82%. And Colorado is right up there with them. So that's a direction I think we really need to go. Everybody has the opportunity to vote. It's safe, it's secure. There's a trail that's there so you can audit and make sure that things are done properly. So I'm very much an advocate for vote by mail.
Okay. So speaking of voting, how does the voting process work in LaPorte County? Can you go over that a little bit?
Well, we have 92 precincts, as I said, and each one of those precincts has to be staffed. Now, we have combined some precincts so that we have multiple precincts voting in one location. The Presbyterian Church in LaPorte, for example, typically has about 3 precincts that are voting in that same location. You are obviously registered to vote. It's a misnomer to say that you're registered as a Republican or as a Democrat. You aren't. You're registered as a voter. In our primary elections, you have to call for the ballot of the party of your choice. But that doesn't mean that you're registered as a Republican or a Democrat. And once you're registered, you can go to your precinct to vote, or you can go. There's early voting made available in our county courthouse. And this year, again, as I said, we had Cool Spring Township and Wanata where you can go and vote. So it's pretty simple. You'll have a voter registration card that's issued to you. It's one of the easiest processes I know. It's just sometimes not convenient because our hours are rigid on election day, and Indiana has the shortest, one of the shortest days for voting in the state. We get closed at 6 o'clock, and many other states are open until 7 or 8 to give people who have a long work day the opportunity to vote after work. That's my biggest concern about it.
Mm-hmm. So has there been an increase in interest among the general public and also politicians about the voting processes and rights since the last election?
Oh, I really think so. You know, the pandemic, of course, was a major factor in our election this past year. But I think that showed us that early voting is very important. I think it showed us that absentee voting needs to be convenient and available to people. And in Indiana, we have a kind of a silly arrangement, I think, that you have to have one of 11 reasons why you need to vote absentee. In many, many other states, it's a no excuse absentee ballot. You can have one whatever your need to have at this time. Uh, but I really believe a lot more interest is there. We have a wonderful board of elections and registration now in Indiana with people who are really interested in making sure that process is fair and equitable and that there's no barriers to people to vote. So I'm very encouraged about it in the Porte County. I'm not quite as encouraged about it in the state of Indiana as I'd like to be. I'm hoping we can get the General Assembly much more interested and involved in election reform.
We have a question here. Are polling place hours determined by municipal or state laws?
They're by state law, and that's one of the reasons why we need the General Assembly to act. Now, there's some flexibility if there are specific problems in a voting place. There are some provisions that allow all those hours to be extended, particularly if you have a long lineup at the end of the polling time. You can allow the people who are in line to continue voting. So there's some flexibility, but not nearly enough.
Okay, so the film didn't touch on redistricting too much or gerrymandering, but that can also lead to voting issues. Can you explain a little bit more about what that is?
Well, gerrymandering is nothing new. It's been going on in this country from day one when the country was actually formed. And what it means is there's an effort done by the people who have the authority to draw legislative or congressional districts in such a way that it benefits one particular party or another, or the person who is in office. So you have some really interesting, if you look at a map of congressional districts or legislative districts, for example, you'll see some strange things. There'll be a map that has sort of a square area, and then all of a sudden there's a long appendage to it to try to bring voters of a particular party into that precinct, into that district. I could suggest to you the second congressional district as an example of gerrymandering. And they've moved counties that are very strong Republican parties into that district so that it's almost impossible for a Democrat to be elected to Congress in the second congressional district now. Whereas in years past, it was a competitive one. We moved from Republican to Democrat. Now it's almost impossible to do that. So they're drawn either to benefit a particular party that's in power, whether it's Republican or Democrat. It's not unique to one party or the other, or the person who's in office. They'll draw that district so that the person who's already in office is able to continue to be. And if you look at the General Assembly in Indiana, for example, the Republican Party has a super majority in both houses. They have a lot of districts where there's no competition when the election comes because it's not worth the person from the other party to try to run because that district has been so drawn that a Democrat, for example, couldn't win. And again, I don't mean to imply that this is a problem created by Republicans. It's by both parties. Whoever's in office has done it. And that's why we're really hoping to have an independent redistricting commission in Indiana, rather than the General Assembly deciding where their districts are going to be drawn so that the members can stay in power. You have an independent citizen group who does it. And then you make sure that the areas are concise, that they're competitive, that there's the communities of interest are preserved. You're not splitting a community. Michiana Shores is a good example. On one side of the street, it's in one legislative district, Senate district. On the other side of the street, it's in another. That's not the way to do it. So that's gerrymandering.
Okay. We do have a question in the chat. Have there been any examples in Indiana of voter registration purges and or polling place shuttering similar to those shown in the movie in Georgia in 2018, 2020 elections?
There have been some registration purges, yes. Some that were done, I think, very well. Some that were not done well and were challenged, and many of them had to be reversed. The Secretary of State in Indiana is really the leading election officer in Indiana. She did a process a few years ago to try to purge the rolls. We had, when you run for office, you get to look at a lot of registration. You had a lot of people who had been deceased for 20 years that were still on the voter roll. And one of her jobs was to try to make sure our election rolls were accurate. So postcards were sent to people, and if there was no response, there was an effort to try to determine whether those persons were still there. We had people who were registered to vote in multiple locations, and there was an effort to try to purge those. I think by and large in Indiana, it was done fairly and effectively. There were some areas, as I said, that were challenged and corrected, but I don't really think we had major problems as a result.
I'm sorry about the weird lighting situation. My lights turned off on me. Okay, so we have just about 4 minutes left. Can you talk a little bit about the Indiana Citizens Redistricting Commission's work and the town hall that's going to be held on March 20th?
Sure. The Indiana Independent Citizens Redistricting Commission is holding hearings, public hearings, in each of the legislative districts. We've had 3 of them so far, and we've had just terrific input of people talking with us about their concerns about gerrymandering, their desire to see it change, to see the improvement, to give us facts and figures about how it's been impacting their communities and their lives. We also are sponsoring a map drawing contest, if you will. There's map drawing software available, and it's nicely, our League of Women Voters in LaPorte County has access to that on their website, which is lbwlaporte.org, lbwlaporte.org. And you can go there, and there's a software system there that will enable you to take your hand at how we might draw those maps, redistricting maps, fairly and equitably. And then there'll be a contest for those who have drawn the most efficient and most effective way of redistricting in Indiana. We're taking public testimony at each one of the hearings that are being held, and the public testimony will be then compiled and given to each of the members of the Indiana General Assembly. We will have a final recommendation to the Indiana General Assembly regarding redistricting maps. And our goal is to demonstrate to the General Assembly that there is strong citizen involvement and citizen concern about redistricting. So our job is to try to get that public opinion recorded, voiced, and reinforced by the Indiana Citizens Independent Redistricting Commission. The District Commission is made up of 9 people, 3 Republicans, I'm one of them, 3 Democrats, and 3 people that have not been involved in any political party through the years, have no political affiliation. So it's a great group. I'm very pleased with the participation we're getting in the commission, in the hearings. We will be having one in the 2nd Congressional District coming up. And the schedule for those, I think, is on the League of Women Voters website as well. Now, in addition to that, on March 20th at 10 o'clock, that's a Saturday, the League of Women Voters of LaPorte County is sponsoring a town hall meeting on redistricting. And we have a terrific panel of people there who will be participating in that town hall. Elizabeth Benyon, who is the host of Politically Speaking for WNIT South Bend and a faculty member at IU South Bend. Ellen Scarletta, who is a terrific faculty member at IU Northwest. Justin Keel, the publisher of the Westfield Indicator and the Regional News. And Pat Day, Pat Boy, rather, who is a member of the General Assembly. We're really going to have a good discussion about what redistricting is, how it will affect and improve the elections process in Indiana, And so I hope lots of people will sign up to attend that. Again, information about it on the League of Women Voters of LaPorte County website, ldwreport.org.
Okay. Thank you, Leigh. We are just about out of time here. Thank you everybody for showing up and for watching the film. Thank you, Leigh, for being on the panel with us. Have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. Great to be with you all.
You too. Bye.